I'm supposed to share memories of my dad, and I'm thinking some of my first memories were at Camp Kirkmont, and that's when I would get to ride his bicycle handlebars going downhill really fast. It was kind of a scary, fun thing. So that was the bicycle ride. And then I think the next memories were coming to Marmon Valley Farm. So horseback riding, and he had a big boa constrictor. I always heard about a story where I let this owl out. I think that was Kirkmont, and I don't remember letting the owl out, but I guess it was big eyes, big owl, all gone, is what I would say after the owl got out. So I let go his pet owl.
Dad taught me lots of life skills here to be used for my life here at Marmon Valley Farm. Many of those simple things, whether it was building a campfire or calling a square dance or safely driving a tractor, things like that. But probably the best life skill is just how to talk to people, converse with people, and also to kind of build those relationships.
So about 15 years ago, we went sledding with Grandpa. And there's this ditch halfway down the hill, and Grandpa said, now make sure you don't sled into the ditch. And we were on some toboggans, and he didn't want us to get hurt. So we're sledding down. All of a sudden we see Grandpa go down and just wipe out. He was just hit the ditch that he told us not to hit, and he wiped out. And we ran down there, and his glasses had hit into his face, and he was bleeding. And he's like, now you see, kids, I told you not to do that.
I remember one Easter morning when all 5 of the Wiley children were home. Some were engaged, some were married, and Kathleen Wiley and I were sleeping together, and it was Sunday morning, time to get up for church. And Kathleen and I were still in bed, and all of a sudden there was a snake in our bed, and Bill had gone outside and found this garter snake, and he brought it up and put it in the bed to get us awake. And believe me, we got awake in a hurry and got ready to go to church on Easter Sunday.
Another thing that Grandpa really liked were his collies. And right after Ben and I got married, he brought his dogs, or I guess we brought his dogs over. And Grandpa had already been diagnosed with dementia at that time. So I was taking care of the dogs, but Grandpa one day decided he was going to go out and breed the 2 dogs. And he was very successful at this. So a short time later, we had a litter of puppies, which I, of course, had to take care of. And one of them, the runt, she was so little she wasn't getting to nurse, so I ended up having to bottle feed her. But then when she was bigger, she would follow Grandpa through the house, and he didn't even know she was following him. But it was pretty funny, and every now and then he'd play with her. So even when he was getting older and not always there, he still loved playing with his collies. So that's a memory of Grandpa also.
Things I remember about Bill. Well, first thing, I met Bill when I fell in love with his daughter, and then I remember kind of nervously making a phone call to ask if I could marry his daughter, Jane. So that went well, and it was good. I remember when I first met him, I kind of walked away going, gosh, does a guy ever take off his cowboy hat?
Grandpa started a Wiley family tradition that when each one of us grandkids turned 8 years old, he liked to present us with a horse of our own.
So my other favorite times were sitting on the front porch during a thunderstorm. I actually had fun enjoying thunderstorms and not being afraid of them. So just the smell of thunderstorms, that was always a good memory.
When we lived in Alaska, he always wanted to take animals up there that they didn't have, one of which was a snake. So he took a boa constrictor snake, and he built a cage for it in the basement of our house. And when Winston was born, my mother came to be with me, and she was so afraid that snake would get out of the cage and eat the baby. But it never got out at all, and we brought that snake back to Ohio, and I think it died of a sunstroke. It was out in the yard, and Winston came running in and they said, the snake is dead, the snake is dead. And it wasn't moving, and it was a real hot day, and it was up at Kirkmont near Zanesfield, and I think the snake did die that day.
Dad loved to tell stories, just like Christ shared stories in parables to relate things in real life. And so Dad loved to tell stories at campfires, and that's one thing that he passed on to me, including stories of local history with frontiersmen and other neat stories that could relate Christ and different Christian values to kids in a neat campfire setting. That was one of his fun things to do here growing up at the farm and or at Faith Ranch and other places. He also just told other crazy stories sometimes too, or jokes that you had to laugh at just to make him feel good.
One thing I remember about Grandpa was we were headed down to Florida for a conference, and Grandpa was following us with their minivan, and we came to a stop, and Grandpa rammed into the back of us. We got out and talked to him, and he was like, "Oh, I'm just making sure you guys were still awake." A couple other things to remember about Grandpa was he would always wanted to plant trees and flowers with us, and was always trying to show us how to whittle sticks and stuff, and teach us not to cut our fingers.
I remember when I was 21, and finally you had to be 21, in his opinion, to run the riding stables. So he would come and work under me, and I just was kind of impressed by that later on in life, maybe not then, that he would kind of submit to the authority of the person in charge.
One of my favorite memories of Grandpa was when we had the Wiley family reunion out at Faith Ranch. He took a bunch of us grandkids out in the woods hiking, and we'd been hiking for what seemed like hours to us, and we're all tired and hungry, and there goes Grandpa skipping down the trail singing, "Hi ho, it's off to work we go." He'd skip down the trail, come back to us, "Come on kids, sing it, skip with me." All I remember was being tired, hungry, and amazed that that guy could skip and sing at the same time.
I remember that he could drive a minivan where most people would drive monster trucks.
Grandma, what was your reaction when Grandpa wanted to start a summer camp?
Oh, I was excited about it because we had gone to many camp conventions and learned what other folks were doing, and we thought it'd be nice to start a little farm camp for children to experience being in the country and be able to milk goats, feed the chickens and gather eggs, and maybe even ride a horse.
Had the privilege also on Father's Day in 1977, on top of one of our hills here at Marmon Valley, is where my dad led me to the Lord along with some other folks on a Sunday morning as we were beginning camp that year in 1977. So that was a great gift to kind of in a sense give to him and give to me to share. It was Father's Day from that year, so it was a special gift for each of us. So that's another fond memory.
Things that Dad taught me that were important. Going to church was important. Serving and tithing were important. Setting goals. And he taught us how to be leaders by serving. And he was always one that wasn't afraid to get in the dish room and wash dishes.
One of the best trips we ever took was to New York City to work on a Habitat for Humanity project. It was in a 19-story brick building that was being renovated for folks to live in. Jimmy Carter and his wife Rosalind were part of that group, and so I have a photo that was taken with them. In fact, I think it's on the video of the Carters and ourselves as we ventured together there to work on that project.
The other thing about Grandpa's dogs is even if you didn't know their names, it didn't take very long to guess. It was either King, Queen, Lassie, or Lady. So yeah, those are his favorite collie names.
Bill is a man of 4 dogs. When one died, he'd just give the next one the same name.
I remember a trip I took out west with him to Wyoming. We went out to do a horse clinic. We ended up in Wyoming in a freak snowstorm and ended up finishing the clinic in Denver in a pole barn. And I guess that what that taught me about him is that he could make anything happen regardless of the resources or the circumstances. He could make it work, and he accomplished things. And to me, I thought that was really cool because I know through the building of Marmon Valley and then moving on to Faith Ranch, resources weren't always something that were readily available, and yet he accomplished great things in building great facilities and ultimately in building relationships with other people into the kingdom. And I think that's, for me, part of the one thing that I remember about him the most is that he was just a man of God. He loved God. He loved to spend time with his Savior, and he loved to share about that, along with multiple other stories about the ranch and the farm. But ultimately, he loved to share about his relationship with Jesus, and that's pretty cool because that's where we know he's spending time right now. And I'm pretty sure that if they hadn't barn danced in heaven yet, I'm pretty sure they've probably done more than one by now. So that's what I remember about Bill.
Well, as I said in my little sharing story, Bill took me camping on our honeymoon, and of course I'm not a camper. So we slept in the back of the station wagon, and we went canoeing, and I had never been in a canoe, so that was a new experience for me.
Alright, so the thing I probably most remember about Grandpa would probably be going on hikes with him out in the woods.
You were on a horse and he was on a pony.
And I do remember one trail ride. I was probably, I don't know how old. All I remember is at the bottom of the hill, my little pony just jumped the creek, and we took off up the hill after him, and that, I don't know, I was just thrilled as a little kid. Going out in the woods and like getting sticks, because he was trying to teach us to whittle as little kids. Probably some of the best memories.
I remember when Bill fell off the horse named Rebel and hurt his shoulder, and I called the E-Squad in Zanesfield. But Uncle Bill wasn't complaining, but he did find out what was wrong. His shoulder was out of place, so he had to go to the hospital and do some exercises to get it back together again, which he did.
Hey, my dad always liked to do teachable moments out in nature, on nature walks, or even with things he had sometimes in his hand. And on our family vacations, he would sometimes take a stick or two along and do some whittling. So this is a whittling stick he'd made many years ago. It's got the little balls in the cage over here, got the spiral thing going in the middle, and then a chain right there, and it's all from the same piece of wood, of course. But the little devotion he would share with this, or the teachable moment, was that, you know, a lot of times we pass by people who we think are kind of just kind of laying around, or not for really a great purpose maybe God has in store for them. But just like this stick was just kind of laying on the ground or maybe hanging on a tree without much purpose to it. But once the master got a hold of this stick and started taking a few little chips out from here and there, and just kind of taking chips out as he saw the best ones to remove from the stick, it became really a work of art. And same thing with God's people. Sometimes God will take a person who we sometimes see has no purpose in life, but God can take that person and remove some of those things that be taken from his life and add some other things to bring the beauty out in that person, their true worth in God's eyes. So that's one of those little moments from Uncle Bill and his whittling stick.
Dad always would tell people that God loved camping, and it's all through the Bible. Camping, nature, and animals, and I think the camps he started reflects that. So, God's first camp was Camp Eden. Some of the activities, God creating something out of nothing. There were miracles. So at the first Camp Eden, there were lots of miracles. There were woods, animals, birds, fish. Some of the other activities, Adam got to name the animals. They were a big part of the camp. So it was kind of funny to me when he was not allowed to be at Kirkmont anymore because the board of directors said animals and children shouldn't mix, so they should not be with animals. And we always kind of laughed at that because Adam had a lot of animals. Oh, another activity, they strolled through the garden or went on nature hikes. There was failure in that first garden. And later on there was toiling the soil. Gardening took place. Dad always loved to garden. In the first camp there was marriage and childbirth and family activities. So kind of a unique camp with a family of 4. The second camp was a waterfront camp called the Flood. And that camp, there were also animals. And that was a big part of that camp. There was boating. That was a huge activity for the Flood camp. Family was important. There was Noah, his wife, their 3 sons and their wives. Some of the activities with that camp. they got to cut lumber, so they were probably lumberjacks, you know, manly men back then. They built a boat. There was carpentry and math skills. I'm not good at math, but they probably had to have math skills for that big boat they built. They worked hard. They stayed the course even when family or friends were laughing and calling them crazy. And I think of Dad because he stayed the course maybe when people thought he was crazy starting a camp and then starting a second camp. But he stayed the course. That camp, they saved the animals, they counted their animals, they fed their animals. It's always important to take care of the animals. So I think the animals teach us a lot, and Dad always taught me that too, to take care of the animals. And some people that can't love people are able to love animals, and through that, hopefully that transfers over to people. So I learned that from him. Third camp, there was a wilderness camp. They wandered around the desert for 40 years. So Dad loved camping, and he would also refer to that wilderness camp. Through the desert for 40 years, when Moses led them, they had animals also with them. So there we go again with animals. The fifth camp was the Life of Jesus camp, and I think that's the most important. So that's what Dad taught me, that Jesus was always the most important. When Jesus showed up, he was born among animals. Once again, there's those animals. So Jesus was born with animals. Jesus probably did arts and crafts with his dad as a carpenter. Then he went fishing with the brothers and boating even during storms. There was preaching on a hillside and always eating. You know, they wanted to provide food for the thousands, and Grandma wants everybody to eat here this weekend. So food is important. There was praying for others, witnessing and healing, showing love to others. Again, family is important, and when the family of God, sometimes there's family, not maybe blood relatives, but God, Dad always taught us that when you accept Jesus and have brothers and sisters in Christ, you have lots of big family all over the world, and that's what I've taken away, I think, most, that that sometimes a friend is closer than a brother. So the family of God is huge, and I thank you and love all you guys. Thanks for coming and supporting our family. God
My
bless
mother
you.
was here and helped to butcher pigeons. Bill had a lot of pigeons through his high school years, and after we were married, he had more pigeons, and he decided that we would eat the pigeons. So he would butcher the pigeon and bring it in, and I would roast him in the oven. And Winston would always eat one whole pigeon himself in a meal. And when my mother came to visit, she helped to butcher the pigeons, because when she was 14 years old, she butchered a chicken herself and dressed it. So she knew what to do with the pigeons.
Hey, another fond memory of my dad and I when I was young, probably about 5 years old. We walked up in the woods in the wintertime, and we took some ear corn with us, and we put some ear corn at the bottom of a tree, and he always told me to see if anybody was home. So I looked down at the bottom of the tree and yelled, "Anybody home?" That was kind of a fun thing in the woods to do with Dad in the wintertime.
In 1987, Matt and I got married, and that Christmas, Bill presented us with these Bibles. One for Matt, one for me, and I'm not sure if he also gave them to Jane and Winston. Mine has been well used, but we've talked about flowers and plants and all the things he loved, and I really enjoyed going to the ranch and seeing that hallway just jammed full of different plants and some exotic things that I'd never seen before, and they were just beautiful. I remember him always at a funeral, he would talk to us about taking the rose and cutting it a certain way, stick it in the ground, and a milk jug over that, and you could get one started that way. And Lizzie and I did one several a few years ago, and we still have some that are living. Most of mine died, but I did succeed in a few. But this is a verse he always talked about as he talked about God and his creation, and his probably favorite verse, and it's from 1 Kings 4:32, and this is about Solomon after he became king and asked God for wisdom, and he became the wisest king. And it says he spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. He described plant life from the cedars of Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of the walls. He also taught about animals and birds, reptiles and fish. Men of all nations came to listen to Solomon's wisdom, sent by all the kings of the world who had heard of his wisdom.
Every time Grandpa would come here to visit us, early in the morning he would hike up the hill to the cross and do his devotions there. And you'd see him hiking back down carrying his Bible, and it was just very important to him to do his devotions daily. And often I'd go outside on our porch and he'd be sitting on the swing doing his devotions. And he just loved to spend time reading his Bible and just spending time with God. And later on, when he was starting to decline with his health, I went over to visit him and opened up his Bible to read to him. And next to every chapter there were dates. And I said, Grandpa, what are these dates? What do they mean? And every time he read through the Bible, he'd mark the date on the day that he read it. So I had the privilege of reading with him a couple times, and we marked off a few more dates in his Bible together.
I remember in his later years going over to visit Bill at the house, and sometimes he would be what we call staring into heaven, where he'd just be staring out the window, and you didn't really know whether he knew you were there or not. And you'd be sitting there trying to have a conversation with him, and he'd just be staring away. And then out of the blue, he'd be, that was a yellow finch that flew by. And, and so I remember he loved his birds, he loved his flowers, and he loved animals. And even in his later years when it seemed like he wasn't always there, his brain was still picking those things out of the woods and out of the feeder, and that was pretty cool.
Okay, so with all my stories about animals, I guess I fell in love with animals and horses, and Mom didn't really like that too much because I wasn't spending time in the kitchen with her. But I loved being outside with the animals, especially riding the horses. And that was my favorite activity to do with Dad, was horseback riding. So when I would get ready to go on a trip or leave for 9 months to Africa, Dad and I took a really long ride at Faith Ranch. And he did get lost one time. We were in the Strip Hills, and he's like, not really sure where we're at. So we were like a half hour late for dinner that night for Mom. But so that's my fond memory of the ride, that even he got lost on his 4,000-acre ranch. God's 4,000-acre ranch. He was just steward of it.
I remember planting this tree with Grandpa when, I don't remember how old I was, but I'm thinking probably 5 or 6. So I remember him coming out here with a shovel, and I think Lizzie and Daniel and I helped to put this tree in the ground when it was only about yay tall, maybe. So that was one of my memories with Grandpa, because he loved planting things.
One thing I remember about my grandpa is he always had a harmonica wherever he went. He'd always play.
Set our tent up right here and turn in and get a good night's sleep. So they did that. They just stopped, they set up their tent, and they crawled in and went sound asleep. About the middle of the night, Tonto woke up and he looked up and he said, Kimosabe, wake up. The little ranger woke up. He said, what do you want, Tonto? He said, look up, what do you see? The Lone Ranger looked up, he said, I see lots of stars. What'd that tell you? He said, tell me there's a great God out there. He created all the stars and everything. Tonto says, Kimosabe, look up again. He looked up again. He said, what do you see now? He said, I see galaxies out there. We have a great God. He created the whole universe, all the stars, all the galaxies. And the Lord says, what does it tell you, Tonto? Tonto said, it tell me you done with a buffalo. Somebody stole our tent.